Jemima Yorke grew up at Erddig, a grand house in North Wales now owned by the National Trust. She was born in 1754 and died in 1770, aged only 16. She was passionate about music, and in 1769 she commissioned a new harpsichord from the important London maker, Jakob Kirkman. After her father Simon Yorke's death in 1767, the Yorke family fortunes depended on James Hutton, Aunt Jemima's wealthy uncle. Her brother Philip, the heir to Erddig, needed to inherit from Hutton to afford to develop the estate and to marry the woman he loved. Family letters show they were afraid of alienating Hutton by seeming to squander the allowances he provided for them on luxuries.
Dear brother, I have done a very rash thing, I am sure. I dare not show my face to my uncle if he knew it. It is no less than bespeaking a harpsichord, which I did the last time Mr. Gerard was with me, as he said I should never make any progress in music on the spinet.
Dear Phil, your sister is telling a grand secret. I fear I must know it to my cost at last. She is excessively fond of music, and comes on exceedingly. Cannot deny her anything that employs her so well. Not a word of this. I dare say you will not mention to our master James H.
Aunt Jemima's story tells us enormous amounts about family history in the 18th century, and it tells us a lot about how people thought about music in the context of contemporary debates about luxury.
This is a harpsichord, and it was made by Jakob Kirkman in 1766, only 3 years before Aunt Jemima Yorke bought her own Kirkman harpsichord in 1769. The harpsichord is a plucked string instrument, so it has more in common with the lute and the guitar than instruments like the organ and the piano. If I remove the jack rail, I can play a particular note, middle D, and the strings are plucked with a small plectrum, sounding like that. And this is the piece, the jack, without which the harpsichord won't play at all. If I play the note without that, nothing happens. This is an original jack, actually, with 18th century writing on it. Jakob Kirkman was the most famous harpsichord maker in England at that time. He was the person to go to. I think that she would have done her research and she would have known that Kirkman makes only 3 types of instruments. The one with 2 unisons, the one with a 4-foot as well, and the 2 keyboard ones. Obviously there was a price differential there, and she chose a model just like this. Jakob Kirkman was the foremost maker in the 18th century. He was born in 1710 in Alsace, actually, and died in 1792. And he had his house and workshop in what is now Broadwick Street, which is just north of Piccadilly Circus. Jakob Kirkman obviously finished them, put together, supervised their construction, and he put his rose here. It's a beautiful rose. It's original. It's thought to be King David playing his harp, and either side of King David is a letter I for Jakob and K for Kirkman. There are a lot of different sorts of woods in harpsichord. Pear wood for the jacks, spruce for the soundboard, oak for the case. And mahogany must have been imported into London, I imagine, from tropical countries. It was expensive, so that's another reason why London was the centre of harpsichord making, because the raw materials were on hand, whereas a harpsichord builder in North Wales would have had considerably more problems in getting sheets of mahogany up there, I think. The harpsichord is very, very flexible in terms of tone colour. At the moment, this is the default 8-foot, just one 8-foot, and you can see how wonderfully it plays chords. And like the lute and the guitar, of course, arpeggiating chord is the best way. The colour as it goes down is quite amazing, actually. One effect of this 1766 harpsichord is the machine stop, and by virtue of the pedal that I can operate with my left foot, I can make a crescendo and a decrescendo. There's also the buff, and that's a row of felts which comes between the strings, and which if I just operate that, you can hear that the sound is much, much more veiled.
My favourite ones were the pieces where I only play using the one stop. It's such a soft sound.
Aunt Jemima's music was an essential element to the sonic fabric of the house, just like her harpsichord was part of its material context.
When Aunt Jemima died in 1770, she left behind a collection of music, beautifully bound in a leather binding. Inked on the front cover are the words English opera, and this is her very own collection of the most popular tunes that had made the London headlines in the 1760s. And we know that she treasured this music and that she used it a lot because she annotated it. There are fingering markings in some places, dynamic markings in others. In some places she adds ornaments, and in other places she adds harmonization, so she writes extra notes into the middle parts.
From my own experience of being a teenager and also of working with teenagers, I think that they don't often come up with the best solutions, and especially don't write things into the score, which is why I think it was her teacher writing in these fingerings to try and get her to play with good hand positions and also to use the same fingerings every time.
English opera sung in English rather than the more customary Italian, was hugely popular in London in the 1760s. And while her brother Philip Yorke probably had plenty of opportunity to indulge in theatre going while he was staying in London, Aunt Jemima, as far as we know, never made it to London. So she had to imagine these operas at her harpsichord back in Erddig.
It's been quite interesting getting to know these pieces. I actually spent a lot of time trying to sing along as I played, or even recording it and then singing over the top, just because they're so dramatic.
English operas in the 1760s usually told stories of love and scandal, and they were often based on the most popular novels of the time. She would have then bought them in music prints. The London publishers would issue the librettos at the same time as the performances were happening on stage, so that people could read the words along and know what the operas were about. And they would also publish in individual arias the most popular tunes and words of these operas. So when Aunt Jemima played this music on her harpsichord back in Erddig, she was really refashioning a whole cultural life that was happening far away from Erddig in London, and she was transplanting it to her home.
We don't often talk about teenage girls when we talk about country house history, but Aunt Jemima's story lets us know how much we can learn when we listen to their voices.